One of the biggest misconceptions for builders is differentiating between markup and margin. The two words sound similar. We think they might be the same thing, but they are absolutely not. And this is one of the biggest issues when pricing your jobs. We're just going to take a few minutes and go through the difference and how this is such a critical element to get right when you're pricing out your jobs. Markup versus margin. So first and foremost, they are not the same thing. They both start with the same letter. They both kind of relate to the profit and loss, the income statement, but they're absolutely not the same thing. And a lot of people make the mistake thinking they are. Margin is your gross profit divided by revenue. It's a super important figure when thinking about your overall business health. You need to understand that percentage. That percentage is then going to cover your overhead costs to get you to your net profit. Your gross profit percentage is potentially the most important aspect of the financial health of your business. So you have to know what that margin is. And likely you have a goal in mind, 20%, 25%, 30%, depending on the industry, depending on the geography, you're going to have that goal. So you have to have that in mind, right? And now we have to understand what markup gets us there, okay? Looking at a sample profit and loss here, we see where margin fits in, right? Margin is absolutely the gross profit divided by the revenue. It's kind of that first line of defense. From there, we then subtract our expenses to get us to our net. So we have to hit that gross profit first. How do we do that? How do we ensure that we price our jobs to the right level? All right, so let's get into it a little bit. Markup is based on your cost. This is how we differentiate here. We just mentioned that the margin is based off your revenue. Markup is based off your cost. All right, now which one of those is going to be higher, your cost or your revenue? Your revenue will always be higher because we're marking up more than zero, right? So if we're basing a number based off of revenue versus cost, we're going to have different numbers there. So markup is based off your cost. Margin, as we just saw, is absolutely based off your top line revenue. That's why they're different, okay? So what markup is margin divided by 1 minus margin. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this math. After you kind of lock things in, I'm going to show you how to do that. You'll just kind of know this, that to achieve a margin of X, I need to have a markup of Y. You're going to figure that out for your business, and you can play around with it a little bit. But let's go through an example. So if we needed to get a 25% margin, which, by the way, is a pretty common goal within the residential remodeling, the building industries. A 25% margin is generally thought to be pretty healthy margin, again, depending on your geography, depending on what you're in. So let's try to achieve that. If we have our costs, what markup do we have to apply to those costs to achieve that 25% margin? Let's go through the math. Markup equals 25%, that's my target margin, divided by 1 minus 25%. So I'm going to divide 25% divided by 75%. That's going to get me 33.3%. So we need to mark up our costs 33.3% if we want to achieve a 25% margin, okay? The markup always is higher than the margin you're looking to target. So let's go into this a little bit more practically as well. So how are we doing this when we estimate? Well, we should build into our estimating tool this exact logic. So if you're using something like Buildertrend or your own Excel sheet or anything like that, we want to understand what markup are we applying and ultimately what are we getting as a margin. So if we had, for example, we're paying for lumber, we can put that in as a line item on a estimate. Oops. We're going to do wall framing material, right? And so we're going to put in a unit cost. Let's say that we're expecting to spend $1,000 as a cost to us, okay? If we mark it up, let's say 33.33%, look at it right there. There's my margin. So I can see within my estimating tool what the markup is, what the margin is going to be. It's doing the math for me, and it absolutely should do the math for you. And again, you're going to start to learn this and just kind of know it intuitively. If we mark up 35%, we're going to get a margin of 25.9, right? So you can see how playing with that will adjust your margin. And so what I encourage you to do is think about, first and foremost, what is the margin that you need to cover your expenses, your fixed expenses, your office, your admin, some of your salaries, and then still have a net profit at the end. Net profit, maybe we're looking for 10%, something like that, right? So what is that margin? And then apply this logic to figure out what your markup is. Make a little table. I'm going to show you how to do that right here, where we can say, if my target margin was 10%, 15, 20, etc., what would my markup need to be? Simple math in Excel, Google Sheets, okay? Equals, take your margin number there, divide it by 1 minus that same cell. Finish my parentheses off, and there's my markup. I need an 11% markup to achieve a 10% margin. I'll drag that down, and we can see the one that we already worked on, 33% markup gives me a 25% margin, and up from there. All right. So this is absolutely essential. And as I mentioned, this is probably the one area that is so confusing for a lot of builders. They think that the two things are the same. You can see why and how they aren't, and how we have to apply this logic when we're pricing our jobs, right? And when your customer asks, hey, how are you marking it up that much? Might seem high to them. It's like, well, the business can't function if we don't do that, right? So it's essential that we apply this logic to make sure we're pricing correctly. And you know how it goes if we don't price correctly, right? We're chasing after those dollars. We're just getting new jobs to fund the old jobs. And it's not a cycle that we want to be in as well. We got to price healthy. We got to be able to pay our team. We got to be able to pay for the right equipment, the right tools to do the job. And that means we have to mark up our costs. It's absolutely essential. Let me know your comments on this. Let me know if you're still confused, and we can hopefully help to solve that. And let me know how you have succeeded in helping to communicate this to your customers so they understand why you have to mark up your costs. I'll see you in the next video.